According to officials familiar with the investigation, Nolan Wells' official autopsy is complete. Now, a man has been arrested in connection with one of those.
26 days after the 4th of July, somebody in this case finally got put in handcuffs. Federal agents, a federal charge, 5 years on the table. And it is not who you think. It's not for what you think either. That same week, the same 72 hours, the state's autopsy came back. Not the private one, not the second opinion, the official one. The one with the toxicology in it. The one that answers the questions a family has been begging somebody to answer since the 6th of July. It's finished. It's signed. It exists. And you're not going to be allowed to read a single word of it. Now hold on to both of those because there's a third thing. Buried in a stack of state records nobody bothered to read all the way through, there's one line about Nolan Wells that changes how you hear this entire case. It's 2 words long. Almost nobody has said it out loud. So here's what we're doing tonight. Who's in cuffs and why that answer is going to sit wrong with you. What's inside a sealed envelope in Jackson County, Mississippi, and a clock that started ticking on the 28th of July that almost nobody is watching. Let's go. Before we get into it, please subscribe. This case moves in the dark, and every time it goes quiet, it gets quieter. Staying subscribed is how it doesn't disappear. And tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Hundreds of people were on that island that day, and somebody watching this knows somebody who was there.
The investigation into the death of Nolan Wells has drawn many into the crosshairs with the rise of tensions on social media. Death threats have been sent to Nolan's family as well as the families of Nolan's friends.
You already know the shape of this one. 18 years old, Horn Island, a boat that went out full and came back 1 seat empty, a phone that made it home when its owner didn't. You know about the tow call. You know about the throat. You know about the 90 minutes nobody can account for. So I'm not going to walk you through the 4th of July again like you just got here. You didn't just get here, you've been here. What I'm going to do is show you what moved. 5 things moved. An arrest, an autopsy, a stack of subpoenas with a deadline on them, that line in the state's own paperwork, and a lawsuit, coming from a direction almost nobody saw coming. Every one of them makes this heavier. Thursday, the 30th of July. Federal agents make an arrest in the Nolan Wells case. Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumarce, 27 years old, Sacramento, California, 2,000 miles from Horn Island. He's charged with interstate transmission of a threatening communication. That's a federal felony, up to 5 years in prison, a fine of up to $250,000, 3 years of supervised release after that. Now here's who he allegedly threatened. Ashley Cole. She's a Jackson County Chancery Court judge. She is also the stepmother of Warren Hudson, one of the young men who was out on Horn Island the day Nolan disappeared. According to the federal complaint, the messages came through Facebook Messenger under a username an FBI agent traced back to Dumarce. They started days after Nolan's body was recovered. Prosecutors say he also called her court's office on the 11th of July. The complaint describes a warning about a package arriving at her office, a claim that once it's opened, a timer starts, and then a line about blood, how much of it there'd be, how hard it is to clean, especially from a boat. That's what's in the court filing. And the part that tells you how long this has been going on, Judge Cole didn't wait for anybody to charge anyone. She posted screenshots of those messages to her own Facebook page on the 9th of July, 3 weeks before an arrest. She's also not the only target. Authorities say Dumarce is one of several people accused of threatening Cole and her family. And Dr. Benjamin Hudson, Warren's father, has said his family has received thousands of threats since Nolan disappeared. Thousands. The Sacramento Bee and the Sun Herald have both reported that Dumarce has a prior record in California. A 2019 arrest, a conviction, registration as a sex offender, release from prison in 2023. I'm telling you that once because it's on the record, and then I'm moving on. Because he is charged with sending a threat. Nothing else. Nothing to do with what happened on that island. And that's the thing you need to sit with. The first person in handcuffs in the Nolan Wells case is not in handcuffs for Nolan. He's in handcuffs for what this case turned into. This is where I've watched a lot of people get it wrong, so let me be exact. There are 3 separate things happening, and they are not the same thing. 1. The FBI is not leading the investigation into how Nolan died. That is the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. It has been the whole time. 2. The FBI is helping examine digital evidence. Sheriff John Ledbetter confirmed that himself. He also explained why it's routine. Horn Island sits on federal land, part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, and his office works with the Bureau regularly. 3. The FBI is separately investigating threats. In a statement, the Bureau said it is working to address interstate threats received by people connected to this matter. That third one is what produced the arrest, and the state has been escalating around it. Mississippi's Public Safety Commissioner, Sean Tindell, said the FBI is taking a serious look at threats against public officials, potential witnesses, investigators, and Nolan's own family, and that making those threats is itself a crime. The Attorney General, Lynn Fitch, warned that anyone trying to intimidate investigators or prosecutors will be held accountable. And then it got political. Governor Tate Reeves publicly accused Ben Crump and Al Sharpton of fueling division around the case. He did not offer evidence connecting anything either man said to any specific threat. So that's the landscape. Threats flying at a judge, threats flying at Nolan's parents, threats flying at teenagers, a governor pointing at the family's lawyers, and underneath all of it, the actual question. How did an 18-year-old end up face down in the water? Has not moved 1 inch. Now the second thing. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office performed Nolan's official autopsy on the 7th of July, 1 day after his body was recovered. On the 30th of July, officials confirmed to WLBT and to NBC News that it's complete, finished, toxicology and all. And it will not be released. The full report goes straight to a Jackson County grand jury, sealed until then. District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath addressed it in a video on the 23rd of July. And I want to give you her explanation fairly because it matters. She said every death in the county, except natural causes and non-criminal car wrecks, gets presented to a grand jury. She said that's how her office has handled death investigations her entire career. This isn't a special track built for the Wells case. It's the track. She also said the pressure for answers doesn't change what the work requires, and that her responsibility is to finish the investigation thoroughly, without compromise. Okay, that's the answer, and it's a legitimate one. Here's the fair question that's still standing after it. This family has now been handed 2 autopsies. The first one, the independent one, performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell in Washington, D.C., came back undetermined. Cause undetermined. Manner undetermined. It couldn't tell them. And the second one, the state's, the complete one, the one that could, they aren't allowed to read. Dr. Mitchell didn't just say undetermined and stop. He wrote down what was still missing. 7 specific questions. What were the circumstances that led to Nolan entering the water? What position was his body in when he was found? Was there water in his airway? Was there any evidence of injury to the front of his neck? Was there any bleeding inside his skull? What was in his stomach? And what does toxicology show? He couldn't answer them because of what he didn't have. The body was heavily decomposed by the time it reached him, so surface bruises couldn't be read. He couldn't examine the airway or the lungs for water. He couldn't examine the stomach. And the structures from the front of Nolan's throat, the trachea, the hyoid bone, the laryngeal and thyroid cartilage, were not sent with the body. Dr. Mitchell was careful about that. He noted that retaining those structures after a first autopsy is sometimes standard practice. He did not accuse anybody of anything. He simply said that without them, he could not rule out injury to the neck as a contributor to Nolan's death. He also documented something else, an area of red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head, 12 inches by 8 inches. No fracture beneath it, no tear in the skin above it. He couldn't say what caused it, and he put it in the report anyway. Now put those 2 things side by side. 7 questions with no answers, and a completed report that almost certainly answers most of them, sitting in an envelope. If you've been following this one since the beginning, you already know how quiet it gets between developments. That silence is exactly when cases like this slide off the front page and never come back. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it's the only reason a case like this stays in front of people. Do that now, and don't let this one go quiet. On the 24th of July, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released a batch of records in response to a public records request. Most of it was procedural: search logs, drone flights that failed because the heat swelled the batteries, jurisdiction handoffs. But on the night of the 5th of July, while Nolan was still missing, a Marine Resources captain named William Freeman emailed the Coast Guard asking for radar data so they could plan sonar scans of the water. To do that kind of search modeling, you have to give them a profile of the person you're looking for: height, weight, what they were wearing. What was in their system? Here's what Marine Resources put on that form: male, black, 6'1", 180 pounds, clothing, shorts only. Food intake, unknown. Alcohol intake, heavy. Now stop, because this is exactly where people run ahead of the evidence, and we're not doing that. That is not a toxicology result. Nobody drew blood and ran a panel to fill out that form. That is information witnesses gave to authorities, entered into a search planning document, on a night when the priority was calculating where a body might drift. Witnesses told authorities. That's the whole of it. But understand what it means that it's sitting there in an official state record, because there is exactly one document on this earth that confirms whether that line was accurate or completely wrong. It's the report nobody's allowed to open. Now the move most people missed entirely. Tuesday, the 28th of July, Christine Wells Wansley, Nolan's mother, and now the court-appointed administrator of her son's estate, filed in Mississippi State Chancery Court through attorney Gary Bufkin subpoenas to 6 companies: Meta, which covers Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, Snapchat, TikTok, and Life360, the location tracking app. And it's what she asked for that tells you exactly what she's hunting. All messages, photos, and videos sent and received with timestamps. All GPS location data. Every current and former username, email address, phone number, and display name on the accounts. And the IP addresses. Tied to logins. Tied to password resets. Tied to account activity and metadata. Read that last part again, because that's not a grieving mother collecting keepsakes. IP addresses on logins and password resets tell you which device touched an account and when. Each company has 21 days from receiving that subpoena to produce. 21 days from the 28th of July. That deadline lands in the middle of this month. And this connects straight back to the thing Christine has been saying since the 10th of July on national television. She tracked Nolan's phone that night using Life360. It showed the phone back on the mainland. She has said that the location history on Life360 did not match what she was seeing on Snapchat. A friend of hers went and retrieved the phone from a friend's house. Nolan's father went separately to a different house for Nolan's car and his keys. Both parents have said they had issues getting those things back. And when Christine and her sister went through the phone, they found nothing on Nolan's 2 Snapchat accounts from that day. Her words, it wasn't even 24 hours, which is how long videos and pictures stay on Snapchat. Her sister looked at it and said the same words she did. Suspicious. Now here is Warren Hudson's answer, and I'm giving it to you in full, because fair is fair. He said there was no reason for anyone to get on Nolan's phone, that nobody touched it, that none of them had Nolan's password, so none of them could have deleted anything even if they'd wanted to. He said there's nothing to hide. He also explained why phones were on the boat in the first place. When you're waist deep in water on a barrier island, nobody's carrying their phone. And I have to say, the part that keeps this honest, nothing about deleted content has been forensically established. Not one thing. The phone is in the legal team's possession, and a joint examination, the family's experts and the county's experts, together at the same time, is still being negotiated. Which is precisely why those subpoenas matter, because a phone can be argued about. Server records can't.
We need people who were there, who actually witnessed it. Those are the people we need to call, because this is the thing, at the end of the day, if the roles were reversed, and say if Nolan saw something happen to one of his friends, or even not one of his friends, just anyone. Nolan was the type of kid or young man that would have been like, hey, mom, dad, look, I saw this crazy event. What should I do?
According to officials familiar with the investigation, Nolan Wells' official autopsy is complete. The results of that autopsy, conducted by the state medical examiner's office, will now be sent to a grand jury.
And now the development that flipped the direction of this entire story. On the 29th of July, the family of Bart Edmiston Jr. released a statement through attorney Russ Latino. Edmiston is a former Ocean Springs High teammate of Nolan's. He was on Horn Island on the 4th of July. According to his family, he piloted his own boat out there and piloted his own boat home. They say he sat for interviews, answered every question, handed investigators a list of potential witnesses, and let authorities inspect his boat and his GPS, without a lawyer, without requiring warrants, without hesitation. They're now pursuing legal action against online creators who claimed he was a suspect in Nolan's death, that he caused or contributed to it, or that he took part in a cover-up. A cease and desist and an evidence preservation letter have already gone out to at least one content creator. And Latino says Edmiston has received a credible death threat over speculation that was, in his words, made up. He also addressed a photo that went viral, one the internet insisted showed Edmiston with a specific young woman. Latino says it's a real photograph, an old high school picture of a different person entirely. And that is not the only piece of this case the internet got completely wrong. A photo circulated for weeks, claiming to be proof Nolan made it off that island alive. Taken at a pool party after the 4th. Rolling Stone traced it. It was taken on the 27th of June, a full week before Nolan ever set foot on Horn Island. Metadata confirmed it. 2 of Nolan's own friends confirmed the date. Then there was the argument video. At a press conference, Ben explained for Ben Crump said multiple people had identified Nolan's voice on a recording, demanding his phone back. On the 13th of July, Trexton Shepard, one of Nolan's friends, went on national television and said that was him yelling. Not Nolan. His words, not Nolan's. He doesn't believe Nolan is in the footage at all. Crump himself has been clear about the standard. Just because his team reposts something does not mean they've authenticated it. There have been AI-generated images, AI-generated videos, and Christine Wansley, a mother 20 days into burying her son, had to get on Facebook and write that the internet was unhinged and ask her family and Nolan's friends not to engage. That's the water this case is swimming in, which is exactly why the real questions have to be kept separate from the noise. So let's go back to the real ones. Strip out the arrest, strip out the lawsuits, strip out every viral post. Here's what's left. And it's the same thing that was left 3 weeks ago. 2 accounts of the same afternoon that point in opposite directions. Warren Hudson has said it publicly. The boat started taking on water. It was an emergency. They were trying to save the boat. And Nolan made the choice to stay on the island with the girl he was talking to. His stepmother, Judge Cole, wrote the same thing on Facebook, that Nolan decided to stay and come back later with another group. Then there's the other side. And I have to correct something here because a lot of coverage has gotten this wrong, including some of mine. Katie McCormick, the young woman Nolan was reportedly talking to, has never spoken publicly. Not once. Not to a reporter, not to a camera. Her sister Gracie spoke to the Daily Mail, and what Gracie said was this. Katie had a conversation with Nolan and assumed he was getting ready to get on the boat he came out on. That Katie assumed the friends calling him to the boat wouldn't have left him. Katie was on the island with a different group. She left with her brother and his fiancé. Her family says they've cooperated fully with investigators and with Nolan's family. Ben Crump put the collision plainly. She's saying he went to get on the boat. They're saying he didn't get on the boat. Somebody must not be telling the truth. And here's the honest read, because I'm not going to hand you a gotcha that isn't there. These are not 2 people describing the same instant in opposite ways. One is a description of a decision. The other is an assumption drawn from a conversation. Both can be sincere, both can be given in good faith, but they point opposite directions. And only one of those directions is where Nolan actually went. Now lay the clock over it. The boat left a private dock in the Ocean Springs area at 9:56 in the morning. It reached Horn Island at 11:14. Nolan was last seen around 3 in the afternoon, and both the sheriff's office and his friends agree on that time. The call to sea tow came in around 4. The bilge pump had failed. The caller said they were sinking. He said there were about 7 people aboard, no children, and nobody over 21. Sea tow never towed that boat. The owner, a relative of the caller, told the captain they didn't need help. That assistance had already been obtained. A friend's boat helped instead. The boat left Horn Island at 4:31. Marine Resources records show it was towed roughly 2 3/4 miles, moving at crawling speed. Then, normal operations resumed and it ran in at 34 knots. It entered Fort Bayou at 5:52. It reached the dock at 6:06. And then it sat. It didn't go to the launch until 7:19. That's a 73-minute gap between a boat that was reportedly sinking reaching the dock and that boat being pulled out of the water. That gap is not proof of anything. It's a question, but it's a real one, and it's on an official record. Around 11 that night, a friend of Nolan's called the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard later said the call did not require their assistance and would not say more. At 7 minutes past 11, Christine's phone rang. At 11:49, she called Marine Resources to report her son missing. That night, she and her husband met a deputy in a McDonald's parking lot and told him everything they knew. And here's the sentence the entire first response was built on. It's in the Marine Resources file. A sheriff's lieutenant reported the deputies had spoken with several of the friends, that when they left, Nolan was in the company of an unknown female and chose to remain. And that based on that, the deputy did not believe there were any water-related emergencies. He believed the likeliest scenario was that Nolan rode in on another boat and simply didn't have his phone to reach his family. That was the read on night 1. 2 mornings later, a National Park Service ranger found him in the water off the northwestern tip of Horn Island, just before 8:45 in the morning. The coroner confirmed his identity through dental records and said at the time there were no immediate signs of physical injury. More than 60 witnesses have now been interviewed, including the 3 friends who went out on that boat with him. And still, with somewhere between 200 and 400 people on that island that day, nobody has publicly accounted for the 90 minutes between 3 o'clock and 4:31. That's the case. Right there. If that gap bothers you the way it bothers me, then don't just close this and move on. Hit subscribe. The families in this story, all of them, are drowning in noise from people guessing. The only correction for that is people paying attention to what's actually documented. That's what we're doing here. I'm going to say all of this in one place plainly because you deserve it straight. No one has been charged in connection with Nolan Wells' death. Not one person. The only arrest in this case is a federal threat charge against a man in California who was never anywhere near Horn Island. The official cause and manner of Nolan's death remain undetermined publicly. The independent autopsy could not establish either one. The friends who were on that island have denied any wrongdoing. Nothing about deleted content on Nolan's phone has been forensically proven. Those subpoenas exist precisely because it hasn't. People online say they hear things in the background of that sea tow call. Nothing in that audio has been verified by anyone qualified to verify it. Crump's team has hired audio engineers to settle it. Until they do, it's noise. Katie McCormick has not spoken publicly. Anything you've seen framed as her account did not come from her. The grand jury referral is not an accusation and not a charge. It's how Jackson County handles nearly every death. And I have to tell you this one too, because leaving it out would make me exactly what I'm criticizing. A former FBI agent reviewing what's publicly known has said that when you add it all up, it looks like an accident. She also warned that more could still emerge. Meanwhile, a veteran crime scene investigator called it shocking that in a crowd that size, nobody saw him. Both of those. People are serious. They disagree. That's where this actually sits. There's a reward on this case now. $175,000. Al Sharpton put up $50,000. Tyler Perry matched it. Terrell Owens added $25,000. And then Dr. Benjamin Hudson, the father of one of the young men the internet has spent a month accusing, matched Sharpton's $50,000 for information leading to an arrest. Sit with that one for a second. Sheriff Ledbetter is still asking? This week, still asking anybody who was out there to come forward and saying that even the piece you think is meaningless might be bigger than you know. Jackson County Sheriff's Office, 228-769-3063. Ben Crump's team says they now have the full CTO recording and have hired national audio engineers to analyze it. They've also brought in oceanic engineering experts because Crump says the tides don't explain how Nolan's body ended up recovered essentially where he was last seen alive. His words, it's not adding up. So here's where we are. 21 days from the 28th of July. That clock runs out this month on 6 companies who have to hand over what their servers recorded. A sealed report with 7 answers in it. A grand jury that hasn't convened. And a father who told his son one rule his whole life. If you leave with a group, you come back with that group. Leave with 5, come home with 5. On the 4th of July, everybody came home but him.
We need people who were there who actually witnessed it. Those are the people we need to call, because this is the thing. At the end of the day, if the roles were reversed and say if Nolan saw something happen to one of his friends, or even not one of his friends, just anyone. Nolan was the type of kid or young man that would have been like, hey, mom, dad, look, I saw this crazy event. What should I do?
Tell me which piece you can't shake. The autopsy nobody's allowed to read, 2 words on a state search form, 73 minutes at a dock, or the fact that the first person arrested in this case was arrested for something that has nothing to do with Nolan at all. Put it below. What you drop down there decides what we pull next. And tell me where you're watching from tonight. Because with hundreds of people on that island, somebody out there is still holding a photo they haven't looked at twice. We don't run ahead of the evidence. And we don't put anything in your ear that hasn't been confirmed. This one is not over.